Today's episode is brought to you by Create Engage, the digital marketing agency for the disruptive management consultancy. Digital marketing has moved forwards, but most consulting firms haven't. Many consulting firms still see their corporate blog as their sole digital marketing channel and find themselves frustrated when these blogs yield little, if any, results. For those consultancies that understand digital marketing, though, it can be a huge asset and help them achieve rapid business growth. In fact, at Create Engage, we've recently written a case study of one successful consulting firm that used digital marketing to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years. Having spent countless hours researching consulting firms and consulting leaders for this podcast, it became very clear that while some firms do digital marketing well, the vast majority of consulting firms struggle to leverage its power and don't know where to start. To help those of you who want to harness the power of digital marketing to grow your consulting business, but don't have the knowledge, capacity, or in-house capability to do so, I launched Create Engage, the first digital marketing agency for the management consulting industry. As former consultants ourselves, we understand the challenges that you face when it comes to delivering effective digital marketing that engages prospective clients and generates leads. Having worked in the industry, we understand consulting buyers, what resonates with them and what doesn't. This enables us to harness the latest in digital marketing in a way that aligns with your brand and your market positioning to attract the prospective clients that you're looking to target. We understand that each consultancy is unique and have a range of services to help you shape, implement, and sustain effective digital marketing strategies that deliver results, regardless of where you are on your digital marketing journey. If you would like to find out more about how Create Engage can help you use digital marketing to take your business to the next level, then send me an email at nick@createengage.co.uk or go to our website, createengage.co.uk, where you can download that free case study that breaks down the digital marketing strategies used by one successful consulting firm to help them grow over 400% in just 3 years and gives you the secrets they used so that you can apply them in your own firm. If you want to outpace your competitors and stand out in the crowded consulting market, then get in touch. We'd love to help you grow your business through digital marketing. Hi, and welcome to Climbing Consulting. In today's episode, I speak to James Constable, CEO and founder of Albany Beck, the specialist financial services consultancy that's disrupting the industry with their unique approach that balances leading subject matter expertise with cost-effective delivery. Now, before I go on, full disclosure, Albany Beck are a client of ours at Create Engage. But it didn't start out like that. I originally approached James to appear on the podcast, but one thing led to another, and here we are almost 6 months later. Having worked with James and the Albany Beck team over that time, it was great to get a chance to sit down with him for the podcast and talk about the Albany Beck story from the very beginning. While I knew some of the journey he and the team have been on, there was lots that I didn't, and this conversation was a great chance to find out all about it. Having started his career in contract recruitment, James founded and grew Albany Beck to become one of the leading contract resourcing firms in the banking industry. This success ultimately led him to sell part of that business to private equity, but that's not where the story ends. Having worked in recruitment for all of that time, James and his team felt that they could see the problems with both the contracting and the traditional consulting model, and they knew that there must be a better way. So they launched their new consulting offering, or Albany Beck 2.0 as it's sometimes called. Their unique model, something that James goes into detail on in our conversation today, has seen them go from strength to strength, growing from a team of just the founders to over 170 consultants in less than 18 months. And as James explains in today's episode, that's just the beginning for their growth journey. We go into a whole load of topics in this conversation, including why James and the team decided to launch Albany Beck 2.0 that is, and the client conversation that actually started them on that journey, how they were able to scale the business so quickly, and their secret to making their model a success. And James's advice for anyone considering striking out on their own, the conversations that you should have with your significant other before you do so, and why Jeff Bezos' wife deserved every cent of the divorce settlement that she got. It was great to catch up with James outside of our day-to-day work together and have a conversation for the podcast. Working with the Albany Beck team, we see firsthand the great work they do and the business they're building. And I really enjoyed having a chat with James to share his insights, his learning, and his experience with you for this podcast. Whether you are looking for advice on starting your own firm, or you're considering how your consultancy will need to adapt its business model to keep pace with the competition, I know that you're going to get a ton from this episode. So with the intro done, all that's left to say is please enjoy today's conversation with James Constable. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, I know we've sort of got to know each other fairly well over the last few months, having been working together. And I was really keen when I heard about the Albany Beck story, everything you've done with the business, and particularly, and we'll come on to it in the show, the pivot you've made from more of a recruitment business to a consulting business, to really get you on the show and find out about the journey and, what's led you to where you are today. And I'd love to kick off with that. For those that don't know you, it'd be great just to get a bit of background on your story and the journey you've been on with Albany Beck.
Yeah, great. So I started Albany Beck back in 2005. Predominantly at the time we started out as a recruitment business. My background was that, amongst other things. But we started off, me and a buddy, above a bar in Shoreditch back in 2005. Because at the time, I think we identified that certainly within the recruitment sphere and also other areas as well, that human capital was the most important commodity at the time. And back in those days, you had large recruitment businesses that, client was king. So we went about having zero clients, just having sort of candidates as sole agency to us and selling them to the right bidder and the best organization for them. And it worked really well. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't without its challenges, No one saw Lehman Brothers coming, and we had, pretty 60, 70 contracts in Lehman Brothers at the time. My wife was actually working there, when it went under. We've got some great merch that we could probably sell on eBay. Would you believe we've got a Lehman Brothers stress ball, and we've got Lehman Brothers caps, and we've got Lehman Brothers Magic 8 ball.
That probably is worth quite a bit somewhere. There'll be a collector somewhere. I'm gonna go and look on eBay after this. The Magic 8 ball. What are the answers? What is it?
Yeah, don't trust Dick Fuld is one. Carefully your toxic debt is another one. I think they're just pretty standard. Try again, or you better luck next time, or something like that. Not like my Star Wars figures though, that my dad sold at a car boot sale for £2 a piece. That apparently are now worth millions of pounds, but Cellavi.
Yeah, we're going off a bit on a tangent. That's why I like these conversations. Pokemon cards is the latest one. That's from my generation. And I sold mine probably 2 or 3 years ago for what I thought was a hell of a lot of money for a bit of cardboard. But, looking at them now, people are spending millions on buying little Pokemon cards. So, yeah, you never know, mate. The Lehman's 8 ball might be worth something. And we'll come on to sort of, the journey with Albany Beck and, where you are today. Or maybe actually, do you want to just finish that for our listeners? Because as we know each other, we'll probably do it a few times to go off on these tangents. But yeah, do you want to just finish that journey of where you got from the team of 2 above a bar in Shoreditch? Because, you're a little bigger and doing something slightly different now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, we very much just always dealt in that human capital element, as cheesy as that sounds. And around about 2014, 15, I realised that, we'd grown to a decent size. And I realised that there was a slight flaw in what recruitment companies were offering and what management consultancies were offering. Because it was around about the time that a lot of the regulatory change was coming into place, and a lot of banks couldn't offload those regulatory requirements. They were still on the hook for them with the governing bodies. And, some of the big 4, some of the top 10 were still charging astronomical rates when they weren't taking responsibility for the outcome. And I think the sort of Kaiser Soze moment for me was, I was at Lord's with a client from a large UK bank based in Canary Wharf. I won't say who. And we just missed out. We'd just been beaten by, I think it was a Capco or a Capgemini for about 30 roles within sort of IFRS regulatory. And he was, we just missed out. We had loads of interviews going on, and they swooped in and won this deal, probably on a golf course somewhere. And we got kicked out and no more. And then the next day they called us up and said, have you got any candidates? So we ended up putting the same candidates through the consultancy. And we were at Lord's, and with the head of reg. And he's going, oh, I was paying a fortune for these guys. And I, probably a couple of bottles of claret in. And, he got his phone out and I was like, they're ours, they're ours, they're ours, they're ours. And he was like, 2 grand a day, 2.5 grand a day, 3 grand a day. And I was like, 650 a day, 650 a day. So this sort of Kaiser Soze moment, really, which was like, okay, well, there's a gap here because there's a real high touch offering that you can do, which is a consultancy service. But when you're not taking responsibility for the outcome, you shouldn't be charging as if you were. And so in 2016, I sold half the company to a private equity business with the sort of rationale to pivot and move into the sort of, it depends what you want to call it, fixed price, time materials, whatever you want to call it, but statement of work driven business where, you take responsibility for what is delivered as opposed to just being transactional. So we did that. We started the acceleration program. I sold another part of the business to a large recruitment business called Interquest PLC, which very much created all of our back office, because as you can imagine, there's so much back office required in terms of compliance and audit and payroll and all these different things. And so we thought we'd buddy up with those guys because it would help us get to the end destination quicker, which it has. And the last 18 months, 2 years, we've just seen really exceptional growth, more than I think we could have imagined. I don't know, I'd say we're potentially one of the fastest growing consultancies in Europe based on the last 18 months. That's unsubstantiated, by the way, but I can imagine, we certainly get the stats. Certainly our Dublin office is the fourth highest recruiter in the local Irish market, just behind PayPal and Facebook. So we've got those stats. Yeah, we've got a lot of consultants on site in Ireland. So there's always been one core proposition, and that has been the people, and that ultimately is what is the beating heart of any business. And we started off doing it as a recruitment offering, and now we're doing it as a full consultancy offering. But we don't look to charge the sort of money that the big four do, because we don't need to, quite frankly.
And just for anyone who doesn't know, and again, I'm trying to put aside the fact that I do know, you and your team, is actually how big are you now? You mentioned you're the fastest growing. For anyone listening, actually, what does that look like, give or take? You've given a lot of caveats, mate. We know it's a claim, but hey, if you're coming fourth behind Facebook and PayPal, that's pretty good going. But yeah, paint that picture. What has that last year looked like, and where are you now in terms of team size, just for others who are listening to sort of gauge, the scale of Albany Beck?
Yeah, so since the start of lockdown, which was March 23rd last year, we've grown by 176 consultants. Well, I'm sure we'll go into the sort of proposition and why it is different, but that's 176 people that are all permanently employed by Albany Beck. They all have bonuses and pension plans and Bupa and all these things that go hand in hand with what a permanent employee should have, quarterly appraisals and the like. But they've all been onboarded remotely, which is nothing short of phenomenal. I've got such an amazing team behind me in head office. We at one point in Ireland, we were Ubering laptops around Ireland from a chap who runs Adam Kelly, who runs my Ireland office, and he was borrowing, stealing off friends and family to get these laptops. At the start of the pandemic, no one, IT was just, you couldn't find it. You couldn't buy a mouse or a webcam to save your life. So it was interesting. And I'm proud to say we only had 24 hours of downtime. That's people not being able to log on, not being operational. Within 24 hours, we had everyone back online and everyone was onboarded remotely, and all the intricacies, difficulties that go with onboarding remotely. I think that's one of the reasons why we did so well last year, was because, we are financial services, and a lot of the banks could come to us knowing that we could scale up a large team really quickly. And all the belts and braces and all the checks and balances have been done, and they are sort of safe to work, adhering to the regulatory requirements as well. So I think that, amongst other things, is probably one of the reasons we did well.
Well, I definitely do want to find out about Ireland, because I know we've talked about it in passing, and I want to hear the full story, because that, like you say, the start of lockdown was crazy. You couldn't get any IT equipment, and how you managed to get enough for all of the team in Ireland, but all of the 176 you've on board, and how you frankly did that, because that's, my maths isn't good enough, but you're basically at one every 2 days, which is an insane amount of people to onboard. But I almost we'll come to that. I think what I'd love to start with sort of looking at your journey, James. It's very much actually starting to your point around the recruitment business that you had before, because it feels like that laid the foundations for Albany Beck as it is now. And maybe I'll sort of let you take it as you want, but I'd love to sort of get your take on actually growing that business, and particularly what were some of those key things that you learned doing the recruitment business that actually, as you've transitioned to this consulting model that you've had, for not very long, but have grown phenomenally quickly, you've been able to, jump ahead and use those skills that you had from before. What was it about that sort of building that recruitment business that you think's really helped you?
I've got to be careful because I definitely don't want to say anything disparaging to strat firms because they absolutely have their place. And we are not a strategy firm. We come up very much at the execution point. And I think when you sell yourself as an execution business, it's because you can get to the root of the problem and you know how to roll your sleeves up and complete the task in hand. And I don't think that's too dissimilar to a recruitment business in a sense of, you've got to get to the root of the problem. What are they hiring? What are they looking for? Why are they hiring? What are their growth plans? What's needed? What's the reason that we're sat in the room together? And then identifying the right individuals to go and address that problem. Now, at the point of transaction, that is that you're giving that person to them for a fee, however crudely you want to put it. But also with consultancy, you are finding the right caliber individual to onboard yourself, put into an organization. We're really, really proud of our learning and development strategy at Albany Beck, which I'm happy to go into. But, if you look at the two products that we offer, we've got the Pioneer program, which is 1 to 4 years experience. It's like second jobbers, that sort of AVP level, growing the AVP level in a bank, which is always really hard. And as a recruiter, you'd sort of roll your eyes when you got tasked with bringing in AVPs. You'd be like, oh God, it's so difficult to find those 3 to 5 years experience people. So straight away there, why not home grow them? So our sort of Pioneer model is bringing them in, load of L&D, getting that person fit for purpose. And then at that point, you can take them free of charge. So that addresses that pipeline of future talent. And then we've got the practitioner program. And that practitioner program is your more standard consultancy offering, but putting in people that have got, grey hair or couple of battle scars that have done the job before. We don't put in people that normally have worked in a consultancy. And as we're sort of the anti-consultancy because we put people in that can say, I did that at HSBC, or don't bother with that program because I did that at JP Morgan. It costs 100 million. Do it this way. And that is really refreshing because ultimately, when the strat firms pull the imaginary pin out of the grenade and roll it under the door as they close it behind them, they actually want someone to take that document that the bank's paid a lot of money for and go, I understand it, I get it, I've done it. This is what you need. This is the scope that you need to do. This is what it's going to cost you. And this is the time I'm going to deliver it. Oh, and by the way, Mr. Client, you deal with me and me only. And there'll be below the waterline of that iceberg, there'll be a load of people, but you have one point of contact, so your bandwidth goes up. And so going back to your question about recruitment, it's not too dissimilar. It's looking for where the pinch points are. It's looking where the problems are and addressing it with human capital. It's nuanced. It's different in terms of the proposition. It's more longer term, obviously. You're not just after a quick transaction, but you've got to still find the right caliber of individuals. And there is a reckoning coming. There's a disruption coming down the line because for a long time now, consultancies have been using contractors and selling them off as permanent resource, and that's just fundamentally not the correct thing to do. And Albany Beck very much is we will not shift on the fact they're permanently because the outputs are very different with a permanent member of staff. When you've got a annual bonus attributed to your outputs, you aren't a contractor. They are in there to leave at 6 and go. When you've got a responsibility for your outputs that's going to get you promoted and rewarded, then your outputs are way stronger. And plus, you're treating it like a 2-year or an 18-month job interview because you can go permanent at the end of that time with the bank of your choice. And we will happily let that happen. We will never stand in your way. And so you know, as bold and as slightly arrogant as it sounds, when we go down to pitch, we say, you'll never use a contractor ever again, and we hope you never use a big four for your transformation work or your execution work, because we can meet it in the middle. That's a very long answer to quite a short question, wasn't it?
No, I really like it, James, and I think it's a really good point, James. I love what you're saying about the sort of way you pitch your service, and I think there's an interesting element in there, in that key point around actually your service offering. As you just highlighted, almost sits between you're offering something more than contractors, but you're offering, as you described, a different model to consulting that comes with a different price point. And actually, instead of going after the same niche as everyone else, you found this middle piece. And I really want to go on to actually building the model, because you've really got clear on that and really honed it. And maybe actually we'll go there now. Is you mentioned the sort of genesis was that, you had that sort of epiphany at Lord's when you were with that client. But actually then how did you build this model? Because again, something that I know people say to me is like, wow, you've created a business. I don't know how you create a model or how you came up with the idea. And I'm sure people say the same to you. And I just actually, how has those elements that you talked about, the different levels, the pioneer practitioner, the different trainings, the sort of the structure. Yeah. Talk me through the origin story, mate. Was it you, for a week with a whiteboard? Was it just?
Yeah, it was all me. I'm going to give zero credit to any of my team. I'm a visionary, Nick. No, I've got a really strong management team. I've got a really strong team, full stop, in head office. And I very much was aware of a program of this nature. I don't need to name them, but we all know about the recruit, train, deploy. There's sort of 3 or 4 of them that do it and do it very well. Very successful. Obviously, FDM being sort of the biggest, most known, listed, billion market cap. And I'm not on here to sort of slander competitors, because they're a phenomenal company. Obviously, we would never be 10% of that size, but there are things that I noticed that some of the other firms do really well, and I'd like to emulate some of those things, and lots of things they don't do very well, and I don't want to do things like that. So we sort of went about defining, what our mission statement was. And there are firms out there that do the junior model, and there's firms out there, obviously, as we all know, the big consultants that do the more senior model. But there isn't anyone that really bridges the gap between the two. And, that bit for me is the most exciting. To give you an example, I fundamentally don't agree with how firms bond their consultants. I've got 3 children. If Daisy left university saying she's just taken a 20 grand bond on to do a 12-week course in Java, I'd hit the roof. And we do professional qualifications, but we don't bond them because we don't agree with it. We fundamentally think it's sort of slightly immoral. And what we do is we put a holistic engagement management piece in, which is like a PMO team that basically sits either on client site or head office, and they ensure that the client is happy with the outputs. But as importantly, and sometimes they don't like to hear this, they are creating the right culture and the right company for that person to want to go permanent in. Because ultimately, after 18 months, if they say, well, we love Joe Blogs, can they come onto our books? And they say, actually, I don't like it. I'm the only female in a male-dominated team, or no one talks to us. We're sat in the corner turning handles. It's not going to work. And the whole model breaks down. So it's a really important area of our business that the engagement managers create this, or the chief happiness officers, as they hate me calling them, help create this culture, but ultimately that the client is loving the outputs as well. And, I don't want to blow our own trumpet, but I will a little bit. Some of our clients like our model so much, they've joined us. There's 2 people that obviously you've met, Will Kettlewell and Matt Penny, that were big buyers of our model, and actually said, we sort of buy into this model so much, can we, hitch our trailer to your wagon? And that's great to hear. And even great when you're in front of a client and they sort of look at you as if it's too good to be true. And then, because sometimes we can come across as a little too salesy, or salespeople naturally can. And then suddenly you've got Will and Matt, who are the anti-salespeople, who say, look, it's true. These guys are they're genuine. And that authenticity is phenomenal. You can't underestimate it.
Something that you mentioned there, I know we've probably talked about it a little bit before, but it's to your point around that sort of difference with your model to other consultancies is that point, like you say, actually, there are firms like FDM where you, after 2 years, it's sort of that recruit, train, deploy, and then you can move on to client. But, if you talk about the sort of typical consultancy, the traditional consultancy, it's a very different model of the intentions to keep people with the firm, to grow through the pyramid. And actually, your model is, for many of my listeners, I expect, quite different. And I'd almost love to just touch on the benefits that you see. You've mentioned around the sort of, the employed piece, but what are some of those benefits, both for your team, but for you as a business and helping you grow? Why have you gone down that model when, some people might say, well, James, if you're getting rid of them in 18 months, you're always going to be pouring water out of you've got a hole in the bucket. You're never going to be filling it up. Like, actually, why does that model work? And why is it one that you're seeing more people move towards?
There's probably a multitude of answers to that. I mean, you can't underestimate intellectual property. And you can't underestimate how much, even when they're on client site, how much of a sponge they are soaking up the IP of that client they're on site with. So then to take that IP and use it somewhere else, it feels slightly disingenuous. But also, ultimately, because we're not hiring traditional consultants, some of them are interested in moving clients, that they don't want to go permanently into a client. And that's fine because they want the variety. But ultimately, some people want to, we've got one guy working at a Canadian bank at the moment who's phenomenal. He's MD level and, he'll be Exco board when he goes perm. So it's taken him 18 months to really establish his name in that business. Who am I to pull him out and put him in another firm in Canary Wharf? He'd just leave, or he would just apply directly. So this is a joint venture. This is a sort of, I know it's very strange, but it's where we go into this partnership together, the client and us, to say, look, don't let your IP walk across the street. Work with us. Let us feather the nest for your talent that you are so desperately need. Let's fix the job that needs doing today with our resource that we put all this L&D into. And even the MD still gets L&D. We have an amazing coach. We have 2 coaches at Albany Beck, like management coaches and career coaches. And, they are phenomenal, these guys. And they still work with no matter how senior or junior you are. And then when you do a great job and you represent Albany Beck to the fullest, you have the choice. Do you want to go permanently on site or do you not? And if they go permanently on site, suddenly you've got a person who loved working for Albany Beck, who will only ever work with Albany Beck going forward. So I don't think businesses need to constantly nickel and dime and, ring fence and have sharp elbows. I think you can go into a business and say, look, we're entering into an 18-month, 2-year journey together. And in that journey, we're going to fix your problems and your pinch points. And at the end of it, should you wish, and should the consultant wish, they can stay on. And all that amazing, IP that they've soaked up, and all the client, all the stakeholders they know, and the fact they know your systems, it can all stay. It's pretty compelling, that. Because I know that when I hired Will from Deutsche Bank, Will was really annoyed because he got sold, a Big Four model, 20 analysts, and I had a beer with him over at Borough High Street. This guy's when pubs were open. Oh, good days. And he was saying to me, like, where's the guy that pitched me this model? Where is he? I've been chasing X consultancy and he's over in Geneva, and I got 20 young people that are texting me, calling in sick. That's not what I signed up for. And I'm like, damn straight you didn't sign up for that. Well, what's going on? So this comes in it very much from a partnership angle, but also when we put people in that are SMEs. They absolutely know their market. They know, there is no hockey stick when it comes to them hitting the ground and learning the ropes. They absolutely SMEs in that area. And the reason why we can do that is because we don't have this vast bench where one person's just rolled off one program and we'll try and fit a square peg into a round hole for another program. We refresh on every project, and our talent acquisition team is phenomenal. I mean, honestly, they are magicians. We've just done a load of work in Luxembourg for KYC. When I was like, look, we picked up this work because no one could find the skilled resource. And within 2 days, we had a team of 10 staffed up, all ready to go. And I literally don't know how they do it. I do not know how they do it. So it's this sort of joint venture. And there's no promises from the client that they want them. There's no promises from us. But if it all works well, and we have, 92% of our consultants do end up going on site. If that happens, it is brilliant. And you've got a happy client, you've got a happy consultant, and yes, it is a leaky bucket, I'll give you that. But how empowering and compelling is it when your ex-employee is now on site pulling the strings in terms of budgets and hiring and stuff? So it just works. It just works.
I think it's a really good point. And like you say, a lot of the times, when I'm speaking to guests like yourselves, it's things that seem obvious when you hear it said like you have. And actually that point of, I've lost count of the amount of people who have built great businesses, frankly, following the same buyers around organizations. And actually what you're doing, as you say, at all levels is you're putting those buyers into organizations so that, your practitioners now and your pioneers in a few years, they'll come back to you and yes, the bucket is leaking, but you're adding to the faucet at the top, if it's the right metaphor. You've already told me you don't know how your TA team do it, and I'd love to find out because, stories like that in our industry are phenomenal. And I want to come on to the Dublin story as well, because I know there's a sort of lot in there. But I almost just on this last piece around the sort of that transition into consulting, because we do get a lot of listeners to this show who have come from contracting, come from other industries. And I think, if I'm honest, a lot of people struggle to make the move into consulting, running a consulting firm, if you've not come from a consulting background. If you've not seen how a consulting firm works internally, it can be quite hard to teach yourself that on the fly. And I'd love to just understand, you made the point that recruitment actually wasn't that different internally. So this might, James, be a really quick question, but actually, what were some of those things that you and the team found in those early days you had to spend a lot of time figuring out? What were the things that actually, for anyone listening thinking, I'm going to go from recruitment to consulting or something else to consulting, actually you'd be saying, look, you've got to look at this first and really get yourself up to speed, because look, you'll smash the selling, but you won't have a clue about this.
In banking, and if you're not doing advisory and you're tasked with getting the job done, there isn't that much difference. If you're sent in there to, work out where the problems are, then that's a different proposition, right? A scoping exercise, that's different. But if you're tasked with going in there and fixing those problems, it's the same reason that you would go out and hire a contractor, in essence. I think the only difference really, though, is that as consultancy, it's through different agreements. To your question, the big difference is, maneuvering my way around a procurement department has been, fun. Don't know if you have procurement listeners. Nothing but love for procurement. That's sort of been that's been a challenge. I totally understand the role of procurement. I totally understand. It's so needed. It needs to be policed. It really does, and they've got to keep everybody honest. And I completely see the point in that. And the agreements, obviously, with the procurement firm, with the procurement business, in terms of statement of work, and whether it's fixed price and the deliverable element, that's wholly different to recruitment. But it all goes back to that one root source, which is good people. That is the one characteristic that shines through everything in the services industry. You have to have good people. Now, IR35, I won't lie, has probably been a big help for us. And I'm quite passionate about IR35 because it's quite expensive to employ people permanently, and especially to give them all the add-ons that Albany Beck does. And there are firms out there that say, we employ them all permanently, and they don't. Unfortunately, that's just not the case. So I do have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about that. I constantly challenge procurement to ask us for our payroll reports to prove that every single person is permanently employed. Obviously, while saying, and you should also check with the others as well.
Do they ever take you up on that?
They do, yeah, they do. Yeah. Absolutely. And I love it when they do. Obviously, there's GDPR issues. You have to block out the names and stuff. But it shows that we have 176 people, paying NI, and contributing and things like that. So, I don't know if I've answered your question about the sort of the main differences, but there is always one main overriding characteristic, and that is just you have to have really strong people.
I think it's a really good point. And you're right, actually services boil down to the relationship between people. And actually, yeah, there's different skills, different specialisms, but being able to offer, I guess, good people in a model that works for both sides, the sort of win-win nature of what you're talking about, James, comes across loud and clear. And I almost just, it's a complete tangent, but where did that come from? Because there's a lot of people who probably sort of be a bit more cynical, oh, I've got screwed over here, or, I've seen a bad example here. Like that ethos you described is not one that everyone's sort of born with. I mean, is that actually something you've always had? Is that something you learned in early years? Where does that for you and the team come from?
Sorry, the ethos in terms of what exactly? Sorry, I didn't understand.
So in terms of actually your approach to business. So, you've talked, the whole Albany Beck model is predicated on a win-win between, you finding a good person, the client. You mentioned around not bonding people. If I was cynical, I'd say, well, James, you're going to pay for my MBA or my CFA or whatever it is. And then I'm going to go, I'm going to leave you straight after that. And you've paid for it and you've lost it all. Like there'll be a lot of people who'd be thinking that sort of, risk averse mindset. So where does your sort of, I guess that optimism for you come from? Where does that open approach come from? Is that something you've always had in life? Is that something that you learned in business? Where's that from?
I just really believe that the way you treat people sort of comes back to you tenfold. And I just think, we're really good at being empathetic. We listen to our clients all the time. We constantly have reviews with our clients, and they talk about some of the frustrations they're going through. And it would be pretty ignorant of us to just sort of listen to what their woes are and then replicate those woes. So the likes of firms coming in, doing an okay job and leaving again with just the bill behind them, that doesn't sit with me. Robbing Peter to pay Paul, pulling people off projects, leaving people in the lurch, that doesn't sit well with me. I just think you can do it really holistically. I think you can, as long as both parties know what they're getting into, there shouldn't be any shocks. And I think, I know it's overused, this disruption bit, but I just believe that you enter into agreement where both parties know exactly what they're doing in terms of, here's your person, they'll fix this problem today, but Mr. Client, should you want to keep them long term, you absolutely can. And the same with the consultant, the same with them. Do you want to use this as especially with the pioneers, do you want this as an 18-month interview in essence? Do you want to work for a large global bank? Not all of them do, not all of them do. But then at least at the end of the 18 months, through regular appraisals, at least the client is aware of that. And sometimes that's just okay. That's just okay. I mean, not everyone, some people do want that flexible resource. But you've just got to we're after a marriage, not a one-night stand. Let's just put it like that.
I think that's going to become the quote of the podcast, James, and we'll be talking about in the week about whether we can weave that into your marketing somewhere. But that's a conversation for a different situation. I'd love to then turn to your point and get into some of the weeds on the growth, because as you described, 176 people, and just to paint the picture for people, that for you was what, 10 times growth? How like, just so that people aren't thinking you're sort of 5,000 now and that was a drop in the ocean. That was a huge growth for you over this last year, just to paint the scene.
Yeah, so when I sold my business as a sort of recruitment business and did that pivot, in essence, we gave that whole business over to the purchaser. So it was all from a standing start. No agreements in place because, as everyone listening to this podcast knows, a recruitment agreement is wholly different to a consultancy agreement. So it was all from a standing start. A couple of key acquisitions in terms of people for me meant that we could push it on. And it's, my budget said that my budget was circa 100 by year end. We're obviously at 176 coming into the new year. My budget for the end of this year is sort of circa 299, and we will exceed that, and we'll be at 500 by next Christmas. And that's sort of
as in Christmas 21 or Christmas 22?
No, Christmas 22. Although never say never, Nick. No, Christmas 22. But the back office it has to keep up with that growth. Our EM piece, as I've talked about, is extremely important. Our talent acquisition piece is extremely important, and everyone has their sort of role to play. And if any part of that sort of cycle breaks, the whole thing breaks. If we pick up a lot of work, if the TA guys can't fill it, clients despondent, they've gone. We probably don't get a second chance at that. If we pick up the work and the TA team put great people in and the EMs are on top of that, and they can't make sure that everybody is happy and outputs are maintained and high and all that kind of stuff, then it breaks. If the people don't pick up any business, there's nothing for the TA guy. So it's all this everyone in their lane, everyone having their own job to do. And I've probably got the easiest job out of everyone because I sit above it all and try and be a bit of a puppet master and get told more often than not just to stay out of it. But I can't. I know I keep going on about it, but the guys are really, really phenomenal. It makes me so proud to work with those people. And we did a thing on Friday afternoon actually to all of our consultants, and again, so proud of all of our consultants who have faced. I've never known anything like the last 12 months. Everyone has been touched directly or indirectly by COVID. And, the fact that we've got, some people in their early 20s, mid 20s that have never set foot in the organization they're working for, and they're sat at home on their own. And yes, we try and do stuff. We have cocktail making sessions and quizzes all the time. The EMs do quizzes all the time, which is brilliant, with poker and we try and do all this fun stuff. But ultimately, they are 25 years of age, sitting probably in a small flat in Clapham, yet they still represent our brand. They still make us proud on a daily basis. And that is probably the biggest achievement of the last 12, 18 months, is that, every person that works for AB just sort of has real pride in our badge. And you've got to be sort of a little bit careful, because we do definitely sell this JV that, at the right time will merge over. You don't want to make them so in love with your own brand that they don't want to move over to client side, because then the client is getting legged over. So it's a fine line, but we sort of see it as a segue. We're sort of nurturing them in their career until the point that they're ready to fly. And now I'm going down a deep
well,
rabbit hole.
Let me pull you back out, mate. I mean, I've been fascinated to your point around, you mentioned a couple of key things there about the sort of the fact that your head office team, they have that finely tuned process and stay in their lane, and it falls down if, one of the elements doesn't work. And likewise, that point around balancing the culture of fully supporting your team, but making sure everyone's aware this is a sort of, it's a marriage, but it's got a divorce coming at the end of it. I'd love to just dig into actually how you approach building the model, and particularly as you scale, the pace you talked about. Being 176 now is amazing. Doubling again at that scale is huge. Almost, how did you build the model to start with, and how do you make sure that it is right for every point in the business? Because I'm sure the model you had when you were 5 people isn't the model you've got now, and the model you've got now can't be the one you're going to have in, or maybe it can. Tell me about actually how you built that model and how you keep on top of it to make sure it is that finely tuned machine.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not easy, because we sort of came out the traps really quickly. We landed a couple of large MSAs in some global banks, and the Pioneer program specifically really caught fire. Everyone wanted to have a chat with us about it. So we sort of ran at 100 miles an hour from the start, and that put a lot of pressure on everyone, including the engagement managers. So what we've done is we've just heavily invested in a new system, actually, called the Pioneer Hub. And the Pioneer Hub is basically, it's a CRM for all of our consultants. So it does all the stuff, manage holidays, timesheets, that kind of stuff. But it also has, so it has like a social bit as well, if we're, playing five-a-side football or quiz and stuff. And there's a front end where the client has a direct access to performances or key performance indicators of our consultants. So it's real time. So they can log into this and they can see how they're performing. So on a remote basis, it's brilliant, because, with one client, we have, 60 people, and they can't keep track of every single person. So this new system that we've thrown a load of money at is going to help a lot of the heavy lifting with the EMs, so that we can act at pace and growth. But there's a new part to this system that we have just put in place, which is a sort of knowledge repository, whereby we're designing and rolling out over 200 courses, which all of our pioneers and practitioners have access to, because we're all about sort of, nobody's a finished article. So I know that's hard for some people to hear. I'm definitely not. And the MDs and the C-suite, they're still not. And we have behavioral courses. We have, we'll have a guy who's, maybe working in finance who wants to do SQL. And they can log into this knowledge repository. It's free of charge. and they can learn about DevOps, Python, Java, C++. They can learn about effective communication, effective time management, diversity and inclusion. So all of this helps to put a wrap around or a wrapper on, what has been a crazy 12, 18 months for us. But now we've sort of taken stock and gone, right, I'm trying not to use that cliche of what gets you here won't get you there, because it's so overused. We just need to say, look, the company that was great in growing 200 consultants, getting more, is not going to be the same company that's going to get to 1,000 consultants. So what do we need to look like? Let's start with the end in mind. Let's work backwards from that. And the Pioneer Hub is a major contributor of that. We've just hired Matt Penny from Deutsche Bank, who I know that you've met, who is going to manage all of our risk vertical. Who's an ex global head of the sort of TPRM, the third party risk management space down at DB. What we do is we hire really strong people that basically make us look good. Matt's brilliant. He's an absolute SME. His webinar was phenomenal. And we're the type of firm that what you see is what you get. But you get to have someone like Matt Penny. If you take Matt's vertical, for example, he's going to run TPRM verticals in various houses. You get his oversight and his governance whilst having really strong, associate and AVP people doing the handle turning stuff while Matt oversees it. And he'll do that in multiple clients. But when he did that at DB and he used the Pioneers, he saved almost £2 million on going down the traditional contracting route. So and when he starts talking about that, it's a pretty compelling argument to come against. You get the brains of Matt and the sort of horsepower of young, hungry, second jobbers that eventually want to work in the organisation.
I want to come back, and I'm jumping around a little, James, but you mentioned a while ago around, actually you'd pretty much, when you started sort of Albany Beck 2.0, for want of a better name, like you started with nothing, because like you said, the recruitment business you'd sold off. And I mean, everything you're describing is working really well, has worked really well, is really compelling. But again, for anyone listening, the obvious question I'm sure would be, well, James, that's great now. You're 176 people. You've got a Matt Penny, you've got Will, you've got these sort of heavy hitters. And I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to grill you on how your TA team do work their miracles. I know you said you don't know. I think that's just you hiding the secret sauce, but I'm going to push you on it, James. But actually, how did you convince these firms? Because now you've done it, you've got a case study. It's easy to say, well, yeah, look, we've got 50 people in Bank X. Of course we can get you 50. But particularly when you look at the difference between recruitment and consulting, you mentioned they're different things. And some banks will see you as different types of providers. A consulting firm is, they can do my analytics work and all the sort of that side of things. Recruitment, you'll find me people. How did you actually convince people in that early day to take a risk? Because it's one thing saying, I'll buy a person off you, James. It's quite another saying, I'll buy 50 people off you and let's get them in tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it didn't start out with 50. It started out with teams of 3s and 4s. But, for the client, it's pretty risk-free. We have an agreement that's more on a time and materials basis. We have very short notice periods if it wasn't to be working out. Although a statement of works can be a 2-year SOW, there's normally a break in there of a week. So from a risk appetite perspective, it's actually not very risky from the client. And, when you go in there and you sort of proposition this model, and, you do hear, this sounds too good to be true and the like, the proof is in the caliber of individuals, right? And this, I keep talking about how good the TA team are, but, it is. I mean, if I remember going and meeting a CTO at a Dutch bank, and them saying sort of like, okay, yeah, we use your model, and they named off the normal motley crew, and we were saying, look, we're different. We don't bomb, we don't do, we do professional qualifications, and we have a figurehead that you deal with. And the guy was just like, okay, look, I tell you what, we're feeling a bit little disenfranchised with a current vendor. Let's start you off with, 2 or 3. And within 6 weeks, we have 30 people in there, because the proof is in the pudding. We actually don't really do straight grads, if I'm being honest. We like someone who's set their alarm clock or got on a tube, because I think we only hire in the geography that they're going to be based in. So we don't deploy them. If we've got work in Dublin, we don't send UK people over there, because we always start with the end in mind and work back. And if they're going to go perm, the likelihood of them laying down roots in Dublin as a 25-year-old male or female who they're probably not going to have a mortgage. They may or may not have a serious partner. And so your conversion rates are way higher by sourcing in the local market. And when you start to walk people through this sort of plan of how you're going to do it, this is how I'm going to find them, this is how we're going to deploy them, this is how we're going to maintain them, this is how we're going to monitor them, this is going to ensure the outputs are really strong, and this is how we're going to ensure they're going to take a job with you at the end of it. It's quite hard for them to say, nah, you're all right. And I know that sounds really arrogant. I really don't mean it to sound arrogant. Sometimes if people don't buy for whatever reason, you are a little bit like, really? Because I don't know if I've just got rose-tinted glasses, but why not? Why would you ever want to pay? Oh, and the beauty of it is we're way cheaper than going down the contracting route because, as you know, contractors suck up 85% of that, daily rate anyway. And if you start with permanent resource, then your starting point and your price is cheaper. And yeah, it's just compelling. So back in the day when we were propositioning this, I wouldn't say it was easy because it definitely wasn't, but it's sort of steamrolled, it sort of caught fire quite quickly. And, we were fortuitous because we landed on 2 big MSAs through relationships that we all have, and we spoke procurement's language, which is cost and quality of service. And so they were happy with it. We won a few big RFPs. Certainly last summer we were beating some of the big four. And yeah, it just sort of evolved from there, really.
I think there's some really key points in there. And, firstly, the passion, I think doing what I do, I know the same feeling. Like you've ultimately got to believe in what you're selling. Otherwise, why would anyone buy it from you? And I think implicit in what you were saying is actually having that clarity of process has obviously been really powerful and was in those early days, being able to show a client the journey that you're going to take them on, that the pioneers are going to go on, and actually that it's not just you've had an idea and you're going to go and test it on them. You've put thought into it. I think, yes, you had the relationships, but obviously those people are, they're clever buyers. They're not just going to do you a favor because they're your mate. And actually having that structure sounds like it was a really big help. I'm going to turn to it, James, because we've talked about it throughout, and it's a theme that you just touched on again of your TA team. And I mean, this is as much selfishly for me because we're hiring right now, and the COVID, I don't know if it's just our industry, just us. COVID seems to have meant, a lot of people aren't moving. And, you've hired phenomenally quickly, and both, like you said, you've hired phenomenal talent, the likes of Matt and others, but you've also hired phenomenally quickly. Like you mentioned onboarding sort of that team in Luxembourg, and we haven't touched on, but we might come on to the sort of Dublin team. What's the secret? What's the magic that gets you these people as quickly and to the talented level that you do?
I'm not even trying to keep our cards close to my chest on this. Do you know what we've got in our talent acquisition team? It's headed up by, in fact, I probably shouldn't say her name because everyone's going to try and tap her up after this, but Hannah Lunn, who heads up our Pioneer program talent acquisition, is phenomenal. And there's a chap called Mike Hansen who does our more senior stuff, but also account managers as well. They're headhunters. And I think that's a really lost art. I'm a headhunter. I started my whole life off. I was at Michael Page for a while, in their financial services area. And headhunting is all you do. Back in the day, it was different then. It wasn't portal based, or it was just, going in and going right to the source of the need, which was the people. And our talent acquisition team, they just do the lost art of headhunting. and I'm really strict with it.
What is that? Just help me, mate, because I've not been. What is that lost art? How does that, I hear the term headhunting, but what does that actually mean, when they do it? What does that look like?
Well, people are so passive at the moment, and people stick jobs out on LinkedIn and eFinancial and all these sort of boards, and what you're getting there is you're getting people that are good, don't get me wrong, but they're normally in a situation where they might have lost their job in COVID. They might be looking for a bump in pay and just using it as a sort of counter offer. When you go and you become a proper headhunter, you eliminate all of those other challenges, and you basically just approach people that are absolutely on point for what you're looking for firstly, so that then alleviates the square peg round hole. And you find people that normally you're one of one that they're talking to, and you just have more control. and we're not a control business. But, when you speak to people, I don't think people headhunt anymore. I don't think people call people up and say, I've got a role. Are you interested? A lot of people are really interested in the Albany Beck journey and they want to be part of it. We're, as cliched as it is, we're a 16-year-old startup. So, and people want to be involved in that journey. But ultimately, we aren't, we've got a phenomenal marketing team, but, we're not out there. We aren't the big four, so people don't really know about us. So the only way to do that is for the TA team to get under the skin, and approach people directly. Otherwise, you're looking for passive consultants, which is not the end of the world. But if they're on eFinancial, they are talking to all of the big four. They're talking to all of the recruitment businesses, and they're talking to, they're out there in the open market. And then suddenly you're in this whole, tug of war over money and stuff. We much rather go back to when I set the business up in 2005 and deal with the human capital element, to be that, find the right people and put them in. And, we'll bring them onto the bench. We have, we don't have a problem with that. With a big deployment we did in Dublin, we brought them all in and we gave them all ACAMs first, because it was a big KYC program. We gave them ACAMs first. They got qualified with ACAM, and then we had loads of classroom-based learning before they even stepped foot into the organization. But the TA team, they're old school. They just take it back to the old school. They will find you and they will headhunt you. And before you know it, you've really bought into what they're talking to you about. And you think to yourself, don't forget, right? We don't really hire consultancy side people. We hire SMEs from banking. And this is an interesting opportunity for those people that want to go into an organization with an Albany Beck behind them, do a really good job, and maybe go on to another organization, or maybe stay put. It's unique. It's not just unique to the client, it's unique to the candidate as well. So normally, Hannah and the team, their hit rates are phenomenal, because I just think we're offering something a little bit different at the moment.
It's a really interesting perspective, and again, having come from that world, it's something and see works. And I think actually what you were saying there about, I'm taking notes for my own business here, James. Actually, if it's on a job board, you're one of many. And I mean, I actually see that day in, day out. I have on our jobs, I ask every candidate to just put our business name at the bottom of the CV, and I get probably 1 in 10 who do it. It still baffles me. It shocks me. But to your point, actually, if you're just one of someone's trying to fire off 10 applications at lunch, that's what you become. And I think it's really interesting, that point around, well, for consultancies like yourselves who aren't the big four, and there's a lot of, listeners to this show who they may have different models to you, but they aren't the big four. Actually, that personal approach is really key. And you can have that one-on-one conversation, and then you're dealing with an individual in a relationship, and you're having it's a market of one, which is always going to be better for both sides than if, like you say, they've got 10 offers, you've got hundreds of people to sift through. I don't think I'm going to get any more of your secrets on it, so I'm not going to delve into it anymore. And I actually think, mate, I'd be keen almost to turn a little bit to you and sort of just some of the personal side. I know we've talked about in passing before, and you touched on the sort of actually the change to your business. And I'd love to, particularly for anyone who's coming on that journey, because you've obviously been running your own business now for 16 years. This is second nature to you, but there's a lot of people who that is a change. And I know for yourself, there was quite an inflection point where, you'd sold the lion's share of Albany Beck version 1. You were deciding about whether to take on this next chapter, which is lots of work, risk, etc. And I'd just love to understand a bit more about that decision process, how you decided it was right. And particularly, the conversations you had with your wife around, is this the right thing for us as a couple?
Is this for Albany Beck 2.0 or Albany Beck 1.0 at the very start?
I was going 2.0, mate, but tell me 1.0. Why don't you start with 1.0 and tell me how 2.0 was different?
Well, 1.0 there was probably very little thought into it. You're 26 years of age or whatever you are, and you can live off beans on toast. It's not a problem. You had no children at the point, so you're so confident at 26. You don't really give it a huge amount of thought. I mean, there was rationale. We sold equity in the business to a firm in New York, so we weren't completely finger in the air. Hence the Albany bit. But it's yeah. I mean,
I didn't know that. I'm going to have to ask, where does the Beck bit come from? Then is that
we celebrated with a few pints of Beck.
Worst bit is, right, I can't tell if you're joking or not.
I'll leave that one out in the ether to work that out. I mean, at the time, this is sort of 2005, right? And the internet was there, obviously, but it wasn't as big as it is now. And we had a bit of a running joke that the Yellow Pages, you still use the Yellow Pages, right? And ABC was always going to feature high in the Yellow Pages. But also, it's an old running joke with Glengarry Glen Ross, with ABC, right? Always be closing. So, yeah, ABC works. Let's just leave it like that. ABC works.
I love that. So, sorry, I derailed you.
The investor very much lived in Albany. So we gave it some thought, but we basically just, I definitely feel like an entrepreneur in that I'm all about trying to sort of do wealth creation, and that can't, the budget's tomorrow, really timely. I'm worried that Rishi Sunak is going to, rip that entrepreneurial spirit out of this country by hiking up capital gains in line with income tax. And I just think that would be a shame, because entrepreneurs who create wealth, and I don't mean the Richard Bransons of the world. I'm talking about just people that create businesses that hire up to 500 people. They're worth their weight in gold. And I'm members of various sort of lunch circles and stuff with various entrepreneurs, and we all have this sort of main theme really in our personas and our personalities. And I remember when Sophie, my wife, who I can hear has just started bath time, with the very first sort of few months, she was like, this is of Albany Beck 2.0. I could have taken some time out after selling Albany Beck 1.0, and she was like, how sure are you about this? And I can come on to this in a minute, but she gave up her career at the Royal Bank of Canada. She had a really senior job in HR there, and she gave it up for me to concentrate on Albany Beck 2.0, which I'm so eternally grateful for, and to bring up our 3 children. And when she said to me, how do you know this is gonna work? And I'm like, why would it not work? And it's that sort of unflinching belief that you are going to get there, that you're going to sort of achieve a really great business. And it's so much more rewarding than just sort of plugging into a large corporation, to know that, you and your team have created this wealth, this whole new revenue stream. We've employed these people that I'm not arrogant enough to think they wouldn't have got, of course they would have got jobs anywhere else, but I just think this country is a better place for people that are creating businesses that invest in people. I'm really proud of our diversity stats. I'm proud of all of that.
You mentioned about, the conversation that you and your wife had, and you decided together that she was going to sort of pause her career to look after the family, and you would build Albany Beck. And I think that's a really bold decision. And there'll be plenty of people listening who are having to make similar judgments, and I'm sure you have this, I know I do, is people talk to me about wanting to start their business or, wanting to do something different. And there's always a reason not to, I'm too, have kids in private school, big mortgage, whatever it is. And I'd love to understand, the conversations that the two of you had and how you came to that being the right decision, really, for anyone else who's in this same position. They've got a family, they've got kids, and they're thinking of doing something bold, like starting a business, like you did.
Yeah, God, it is not an easy conversation to have by any stretch. I mean, it came twofold, really. One, that I wanted to, really get Albany Beck 2.0 on firing on all cylinders, and another that, we have 3 children under the age of 10. That, thank goodness we made that decision pre-lockdown, because without it, I don't know what we've done. And I so feel for everyone who 2 parents that are working and juggling homeschooling. Absolute nightmare. I mean, I've got to be careful she doesn't overhear this. I have joked about, how I sort of have complete sympathy for Jeff Bezos' wife, who got, I don't know how much it was, 50 billion or something, because, I created this company, but I created it with Sophie as well. I'm very bad at coming back and talking about the good days, and she constantly reminds me of that. But I'll be very happy to walk through the door. That book about exercising your chimp.
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to walk through the door and be, today this bank did this, no. And so you make these decisions as a leadership team, as a management board, but you also make them at home, with your other half. And so when you read about Bezos' wife getting 50 billion, good on her, because I guarantee you there was times that he wanted to throw the towel in. There's times that, he was probably, without getting too deep, sat on the sofa sort of crying because he can't meet, his weekly payroll. And she would have empowered him at some point, or many points during that, to say, come on, keep going, you can do it. And so it's one of those funny things, isn't it? When you look at it and you think, all fat. I know she's the richest woman in the world now, but all power to her because, without Sophie doing what she did and making the ultimate sacrifice of her career, where right now she'd be absolutely flying. And maybe this is a problem with diversity, and maybe this is a conversation for a wholly different day. And maybe it's a shame that naturally the woman sometimes feels the need to do that. And I'm not going to go down that conversation strand because that's a big conversation. But, she enabled me to be able to devote all my time and attention into making this work. And I'm giving you the headline act as to, what we've got, but it has been absolute blood, sweat, and tears. It's been weekends, it's been midnight finishes. When you are going up against those amazing machines that are the big four, and they have 20 people in bids and tenders, and you have one, they have marketing functions that are phenomenal. And
well, so do you, James. That's that's not a problem. We know that, but
exactly. And firsthand when it's like, hey, listen, can I get this pitch deck ready for 1 o'clock today? We probably do have imposter syndrome a little bit at Albany Beck, and I think that's quite healthy. I attended a Jim Collins. I don't know if you know Jim Collins. Attended a Jim Collins thing with my chairman last week, and he talked about sort of positive paranoia. And I think that's really good. Positive paranoia, what's going to, it kills you because your blood pressure is constantly off the scale, but, you're constantly thinking what's going to go wrong? Have we got too many consultants in one organization? What's the risk involved in that? What else? We're going to have a key person resign. And so what it does is it just keeps you on your toes, but it means that you're never really surprised, and when it doesn't happen, excellent. When it does, you're prepared for it. I've gone away from talking about my wife, haven't I, suddenly? But I think she's outside the door, so I don't want her ego to get too big. But no, it down to the success of AB has definitely been down to that decision that we made, and my management team that Phil, Adam, their wives have made similar sacrifices. It requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice, whether it be on a personal level or on a partnership level, to get business off the ground. Anyone out there that's thinking of starting their own business, they definitely should, 100%, but they've got to be prepared to be a monomaniac. They've got to be prepared to commit 110% to the cause, put their blinkers on, don't look left, don't look right, just look at the end goal and make sure you get to that. Because you have definitely those days that I wanted to probably give it up was the days that, Sophie was like, hello, career, on hold, hello, and it gives you that second win. So no, it's she's phenomenal.
I think some really good, and it's great, James, to get the sort of candid take on all of it, because I think particularly right now, entrepreneurship is cool. Everyone's on Instagram wanting to be entrepreneurs, and actually, I think, like you say, some of that hard work, but most importantly, the impact it has on your family. I know the same. I couldn't do this without my wife, and if you're in a relationship, it's a two-person sport. It's not that you do, you don't leave it at the office, as it were, and that's both physically, you're working weekends and late, etc. But metaphorically, like you say, in terms of how you're feeling, you're preoccupied, and I think your point on Jeff Bezos's wife is really key. It wouldn't be there without her. You just don't see that, and I think actually wrongly, you rarely hear about the wife of the entrepreneur, the home life. I think that's changing a little bit now that sort of Instagram and things have meant you see more people's personal lives, but actually you don't see all those, those challenges. And it is really a two-person sport. So I think, really, really powerful point. And, I think your advice for people who are thinking of doing it, is really, really good as well. Like you say, that you've got to be focused on it because otherwise it's never going to get to where you want. And I guess the last question, I probably should have started with this one on this topic, but I think we've touched on it loosely, James. It kind of might summarize the whole conversation before we go to sort of the final questions. There will be someone listening thinking, James, you built a great recruitment business. You obviously sold that. And, we're not going to go into the figures, but why do it again? Why not either sail off to the sunset or frankly go get a really easy job somewhere else where you're working 9 to 5 or a bit less, you're on the golf course. What was it that made you go again? Why did you decide, I've got this idea, Albany Beck 2.0, everything you've described, I've got to go for it?
My chairman is a chap called Gary Ashworth, who has, I'm sure, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, he's done well. And, he sort of shares the same sort of I just don't imagine him ever retiring, irrespective of what you have in terms of physical things, because it's not really about what you have physically and what you own or what house you've got or what car you've got. It's about, like, I don't know. I need to not let this sound as soppy as it's going to sound, but it's about creating something, And I'm not saying that I'm going to create something for my children to inherit. Unfortunately, Albany Beck and Sons or Albany Beck and Daughters, it doesn't really, that's not really life anymore. But it's about just being able to stop, take stock, look back and go, yeah, I did that. Me and my management team did that. We created this business from scratch with nothing else. And now it's got consultants, it's got young people that are, going to be future MDs of organizations. And we did that. And that, unfortunately, is, why I'm going to keep doing it, because it's that I just don't think I'll ever get to the point where, and Sophie will hate me saying this, because I think, she would like to see me take my foot off the gas a little bit. I just don't think that will ever happen. I think the natural sort of character trait of an entrepreneur is they're just never really settled. They're constantly looking for stuff. They're constantly evolving. I just think that they do something, they complete it, and then they're on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, because they sort of have an unwavering belief in themselves. I'm not saying I necessarily do, but normally they have an unwavering belief in themselves, and they get an idea. Phil, who I know jokes to me about it, because I'll picture something and I'll be like, let's just go for it. And he's a real sort of, he needs to plot that course. It's A to B to C to D. And I'm like, forget that, if that's what it looks like, let's just go for it. And we might deviate, but let's get there. We'll always get there in the end. And that's what really gets me out of bed in the morning. And and fear gets you out of bed in the morning. You'll be experiencing it as well, Nick. You own your own business. It's not a particularly old business, but there is a fear factor, and the fear factor is you've got payroll to meet this month, and you have to meet that payroll. You have a duty of care to your employees to pay them, and you have a duty of care to offer them a career advancement. You have a duty of care to grow your business and to show your wife that it was the right decision. And that fear, if you can use that in the right way, that's the best form of motivation possible. Not fear of failure, because that's just a bit old hat, but it's that fear of like not delivering on what you think you're going to deliver on and letting people down. And you don't have that in your locker if you necessarily have gone down that traditional corporate route where, you're going to go from AVP to VP to D to MD to Exco. Your pension pot is getting topped up by £250,000 every year or whatever it might be. There is, by the way, there's different fears in that. I'm not saying that one is a better course than the other, but you're not normally ever worried about, if it's a bad year, have you got enough money to pay your employees or feed the family? It's a different sort of fear. And I think some people are more that way and some people are more this way. And you've gone from, and it's not about you, but you've gone from one course to the other. And, if we had more time, I'd ask you how you're finding that, but it's a whole different.
Maybe that's around to our, we've talked about doing the Albany Beck podcast, James. So maybe that's the, I'll come on your show. And I mean, I've talked about it a little before, and it's not, I don't want to steal from your interview, but it is interesting. You've had this life from day dot. Actually, I was never the kid selling sweets in the playground. I was always very jealous someone else thought of it, because they made, 20p premium, which when you're 12 is a lot of money. But I think you're spot on around actually those drivers. Now, it's interesting hearing the passion in your voice, because like you say, you've created something, and actually it's that drive to create. It's not, and for anyone listening who's thinking of this route, it's not a job where you're just doing long hours. You are creating a thing. And I love what you're saying as well around that, that helping the team come through. Because for me, that's something I love as well, watching your team develop, watching, the business develop, and also just seeing, where your clients go. It's funny, I used to think this was really cheesy and just something that the people at the top had to say, but actually now I'm seeing it with my own team, and you were saying it with yours. Like that's the exciting thing. The sort of financial side obviously has a place, but it's seeing all of those things come together that's amazing. And so no, I won't steal the limelight, James, but we can maybe over that beer we keep talking about, when lockdown ends, with 2 months away, mate, we'll
Bring it on.
We'll finally be there.
That whole wealth piece comes as a byproduct of pulling off what your raison d'etre will be, and the wealth will come a secondary to that. And don't get me wrong, I don't own a registered charity. We are in this business to for lots of reasons, and money is one of them. I mean, anyone that tells you different is unfortunately that's a bit of a falsity. But if you do it right, then as a byproduct, the money usually follows.
And so we are almost at the end of today, and you mentioned bath time, and I don't want to keep you too much past bath time and bedtime.
No, feel free.
Well, I've made a commitment to my wife as well that we don't have kids yet, but I need to get to dinner at some point.
You have a puppy. That's
we do. She's been brilliant. She's sadly, they grow up quickly. Again, I know parents hate people comparing kids to dogs, but we've got a dog, and so that's all I can compare to. They grow bloody quickly. She's 6 months old now. She's a dog. She's not a puppy, but we need to see her as well. So the last questions, and these are ones that I ask every guest, and I know as you've listened to a few of these episodes, you'll probably know what's coming. And well, there's two questions and a sort of last one just for anyone who wants to reach you. But for that first of the questions, it's about books. So you mentioned Jim Collins, and I've not been to a seminar. I've read his books, and it was really powerful for me. And I'd just love to hear from you if there is a book or books, that you found had a really big impact on your journey, or you find yourself giving to the, Albany Beck team or your management team or, clients sort of, consistently. Is there any book that stands out like that for you?
Yeah, I don't really do the sort of self-help book. I should do. Evidently, I should do more of. I think the book that probably had the most effect on me was the Dr. Spencer Johnson book, and Who Moved My Cheese. And probably 99% of people would say that, but I think I haven't just read it, inhaled it. I've actually done it. Because obviously the whole premise of that book is around doing the same thing. Can't remember. Phil uses it all the time, but I can't remember the quote is. The madness is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And the pivot that AB 2.0 made really epitomised that, because we noticed the market changing, we noticed the movements in the market, and how the need for certain skill sets and requirements is now going to be different to how it has been, and it will still evolve. If any listeners haven't read that, read that book, because it highlights in a very simplistic, childlike fashion, but also one of the best books on, on economics that you can read. But it just highlights the fact that you have to evolve. If you look at all the greatest businesses in the world, they all evolved in some capacity. Amazon was selling books out of a garage, right? And if Apple, was big clunky computers, and then suddenly they're, finding iPods and iWatches, and guarantee they'll be doing cars and TVs in the next few years. And same with Amazon and the Alexas of the world. It's all about that evolution and tapping into something new, but having that foresight to predict what's coming down the line. And also another book that, and this is again a bit cliche, but I was living in America 98, 99, just sort of at university, took some time off, and I read Losing My Virginity by Richard Branson. And at the time, he was like your young entrepreneur's pin-up. He was like, he owned an airline and he owned record labels, bars. I mean, her guy was an absolute hero. Losing My Virginity was a really good book for me, because it just sort of showed, he left school at 16, he was dyslexic, and he just went for it. And there's bits of gap. He's 21 and suddenly he buys Mike Oldfield a Bentley, and there's some little gaps in it where you think there's maybe a bit of family money in there, but ultimately it just shows that bravado, backing yourself to the hill, and just imagining it, and you one day can own an airline, my son,
and an island.
Yeah, and an island. Yeah, and he owns Necker, doesn't he? Although half it burnt down. But yeah, he's an interesting guy. I'm not sure. I wouldn't want to get into the wranglings of tax exile and all that kind of malarkey. But I think, in essence, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, he really was. And also, how good is it that he became his own brand? Virgin was just a brand that was associated with him, where they sold failed Coca-Cola, or where they sold records or airlines or hotels or gyms. He just had that brand, and he loved that, his own marketing. He knew, as a marketing guy, appreciate probably more than I do how that is just phenomenal, and it could have gone either way. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that try and market themselves by using their own brand, and it's not so well received.
Well, I think, on Branson, like you say, I mean, I think it comes back to what you started the show with. He has been very good at identifying where there is a need. And actually, a lot of people, like you say, with their own brand, at some point, the fall is they get arrogant. They think because it's got my name on it, people will buy it. And, actually with Branson, they had a bit of that with the Virgin Cola, but he's successfully built that and, that persona around finding things that aren't working and solving them. It's Who Ate My Cheese. I have read, and it's also because this is an audio show and you've not got the book in front of you, but it's actually only a tiny book. It's sort of you can read it on a train, but that whole premise of going to the new market, going to find the cheese, not wait for the cheese to come back to you. And for anyone listening who wanted the précis, that's the précis of the book.
You've just ripped off Johnson's commission there by hundreds of thousands of pounds. People are just not even going to go and buy it now.
Well, James, I'll be honest, there's many people who tell me this show is probably an hour and however much longer than it should be. So I figure, if someone's got to this, I'll give them the précis. But if someone's got this far, you'll usually read the book. But that book's really key. And I think you hear a lot of stats banded around, kids today, their jobs aren't invented yet. We don't know what they'll be doing in 10 years' time, all of this stuff. And actually, for anyone listening, whether, we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship and whether you want to start a business, but whether you don't, whether you just want to build a successful career in a consulting firm, it's the same principle. You have to be going to where the market is. Branson, as you said, he always found the next thing. He wasn't saying, what's the thing that someone else has done 10 years ago? He said, where should we go next? And, every time people thought he was a bit crazy, but that's the way that everything in the world moves forward. So I think some really good books. And surprisingly, I think you're the only the second guest to talk about Who Moved My Cheese. You might
really?
Yeah, it's a complete tangent, but at some point in the future, hopefully this year, I want to turn these interviews into a book. And I do want to actually have a list of all of the books that my guests have recommended, because there's an amazing list. But yeah, I think you might be only the second one. So,
surprised.
But hey, it's a great book, and that's why I say I'm surprised more people haven't mentioned it. But there's one maybe I might buy it for the team, give everyone a copy. And I'm not just saying that because it's a small book and therefore quite cheap as well.
Just buy one and photocopy it.
Well, I've given the précis now, James, so no one needs the book. Fine cheese, that's the summary. But bringing us back on track, right? And the very last sort of question for today, and this is, I guess, as much a chance to summarize things as it is to sort of give new advice. And it's quite simply, you've got three people in front of you. You can give one piece of advice to each, and those three people are a graduate, so someone straight out of university, just starting that career in consulting. Your second person is someone who's sort of 3-4 years in, so actually you're sort of, I guess, that mid-pioneer level. You mentioned they don't always come straight out of university, so that's sort of, they've done a job, they've seen a bit of the world, but they're still quite junior. And then the third person is someone who's approaching that director level. So approaching partner in a traditional consulting firm, in a sort of investment bank, they might be approaching that sort of, is it sort of MD level? It's that point where you've got to decide, this is for me. Or, they might be starting a business. It's, I'm making a big life change at that senior level. And the question is quite simply, what one piece of advice would you give to each three of those people?
Well, for the graduate, quite simply, say yes. Just say yes. Whatever's asked of you, just say yes. You are cutting your teeth in your career. If you're asked to do what you foresee as not your long-term goal, just say yes, because there'll be someone who's saying it to you for a reason. And the beauty of consulting is it's so varied, and you can roll on from project to project. And if you're the person that says yes, your stock goes up. I'm not saying be a general dog's body. I'm just saying try as much as you possibly can, keep what works. With the mid-level, I would say, when you found something that genuinely spikes interest, not that you're a bit blasé about it, there's something that really interests you, a sector or a skill set and something within that, just pour accelerant on that and just become the inch-wide, mile-deep strategy in that, because if you are interested in it, that is half the battle, and you will live, eat and breathe that, and your career will develop because of the passion that you have in that area. So, the old adage, if you fire bullets and then when one lands, you fire cannonballs. It's a little bit like that with a graduate. But then when you're that sort of 3 to 5 year level, you will have established what works for you and bet heavily on that move. And then for the partners, it's a bit of advice that I take myself, don't be complacent, keep learning, have your cup overflowing in terms of new things in the market. The amount of partners that I've interviewed that blockchain, that'll never catch on, or something like that. Don't be that person. Move the cheese, evolve, learn more and more and more. Don't ever be complacent and think you're the finished article. We aren't, as I said earlier, the finished article. There's new things coming back all the time. And the best consultants that work for Albany Beck at the senior end are the people that have a genuine interest in new things coming out. All things data, even if they don't work in data, they're craving to learn about Hadoop and all these different things. And they work in reg, or they work in risk or finance, but they're just craving that more and more knowledge. So don't be complacent and keep learning, keep moving the cheese, keep evolving on a personal level. And if you want to start a business, give it the taste test, make sure it stands up, make sure you're passionate about it, and grab the nettle and go for it.
James, I think that is a brilliant place for us to finish. So thank you very much for that. I think that go and find the cheese, go and move the cheese is going to be the one that sticks to me. I'm going to go and actually dig it out. I don't know where it is. I'm sure it is in my sort of study downstairs. I'm going to go and find it after this. But thank you very much. Obviously we've got to know each other, really well over the last few months, but it was great to actually spend some time digging into the story and, sharing that with my listeners as well, because there's people like yourself and the Albany Beck team doing great things that, our industry is so fragmented. I want to bring everyone together to learn from each other. So thank you for sharing everything you have. And the last question then for anyone who's listening is just if they want to find out more about Albany Beck, either they want to potentially hire you as consultants or they want to find out about joining as a pioneer or practitioner, where would you point them to? Where can they get in touch?
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you, Nick. I've actually really enjoyed it. I didn't know how it would go.
You sound like you were surprised when you would enjoy it, James.
Well, I was just nervous you were going to bring up that band management thing throughout the whole thing. So I'm glad you didn't. If you want to get in touch, obviously LinkedIn, James Constable, or my email address, which I'm happy to disclose, is jconstable@albanybeck.com, ALBANYBECK.com. You can reach us that way, or you can, go onto our LinkedIn company page and find any of my staff. Leave them alone, but you can find any of my staff, or you can find me. But yeah, I always love to hear from people, whether it be just, talking about the market or whether it's potential customers. It's all good. It's all good to brain dump and shoot the breeze.
Fantastic, James. Well, thank you for that. I'll put your email, Albany Beck's website, the LinkedIn, all in the show notes as well, so anyone who wants to find out more can find out more and get in touch. And yeah, really enjoyed this. I haven't brought up the band. I'll ask you about that later because I do want to find out. But we've got a round two somewhere, James, given everything we've talked about. So maybe that we'll hold that back for round two. But no, I've really enjoyed this, James. So all that's left to say is thank you very much and all the best for the rest of your week.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. All the best.
Cheers, James. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Climbing Consulting. If you have any guest recommendations, comments, ideas, thoughts on how I can make this show better for you, just drop me an email. It's nick@createengage.co.uk, and I really look forward to hearing from you.